Hello class, welcome to Chapter 8, Support Functions. This chapter discusses the roles and responsibilities of various support positions and the facilities that help the fire department function so field personnel can conduct emergency and non-emergency operations. The objectives we're going to cover in this class are: we will discuss the role of dispatch, discuss the transmission of alarms, identify the resources in the fire investigation unit, and identify the resource in the hazardous materials control unit. We will also discuss the role of an adjutant or aide, identify technical support groups and discuss their roles, discuss resources available for information systems, discuss the role of personnel and human resources, and then we will discuss the role of a business manager, the role of an incident business management, discuss the role of warehouse, central stores, discuss the role of a repair garage, and discuss the role of a radio shop. Fire department operations can be divided into several areas, which can further be divided into those that are incident focused and those that are not. Not all of the personnel who work for the fire department respond to incidents. Many work in supporting roles that aid the incident responders performing their jobs. Organizations cannot function without support and assistance from other areas. Engines and equipment like self-contained breathing apparatus, radios, training facilities, etc. need to be maintained. These personnel not directly engaged in fighting fires and responding to incidents are considered support personnel. All of the support functions under the management direction of the staff are required to enable field personnel to conduct emergency and non-emergency operations. As in other areas of administration and operations, the size and complexity of the support functions are dependent on the needs of the department. In small departments, many of the service and repair functions may be handled through outside contractors. In large organizations, it may be more economically feasible to have internal support personnel to maintain radios and SCBA. For organizations of any size, the support functions must be in place to provide an effective and efficient fire protection system to the community. The fire department requires the capability of receiving requests for emergency service and sending its units to the scene of the incident. Even in a one-station department, there needs to be someone who answers the phone and dispatches services. Small departments may rely on the police department dispatch service to alert their personnel. Volunteer fire departments issue their personnel pagers so they can be alerted while at their homes or jobs. In larger fire departments, the dispatch section is usually a purely fire department function. The personnel assigned may be firefighters or civilians depending on the department's preference. The positives of assigning firefighters to dispatch positions are as follows. Firefighters are familiar with departmental operations and can often anticipate the needs of the units assigned to the incident. This can be of great help to the incident commander during intense activity when many resources are being assigned and are responding. Also, having someone who understands the situation assisting with the tracking of resources helps the incident commander focus on what is happening and what is about to happen at the scene. The negatives of assigning firefighters to dispatch positions are that it is much more expensive in salary and benefits. Firefighters are action-oriented people and tend to feel helpless while listening to a dispatch console as their colleagues are engaged in a fight. In too many incidents, also, firefighters have gotten themselves in bad situations and no one heard them call for help. Or in some cases, they died because no one came to their rescue. With dispatchers listening to the incident radio traffic in a controlled environment that is much quieter and less chaotic than the incident scene, the calls for help might have been heard and reported to the incident commander at the scene. And then finally, many firefighters never do adjust to the dispatch position and return to an operations assignment at the first opportunity. Let's discuss expanded dispatch. In certain situations, incidents receive a point where they are beyond the immediate capabilities of the dispatch center. There may be a major wildland fire occurring, but other smaller scale incidents could also be occurring simultaneously, such as structure fires, a hazmat incident, medical aid incidents, and the normal traffic of equipment going in and out of service. It does not take very long for dispatchers to become overloaded. Sometimes departments handle this by setting up an expanded dispatch to take some of the load off of the dispatchers performing their normal duties. The expanded dispatch is set up at a location outside of the normal dispatch center. Some departments have a mobile command post and others move into a conference room at headquarters or a classroom at the training center. When several radio channels are available, all of the radio traffic for a large incident is switched to a designated channel. The orders for resources are handled by dispatch recorder personnel. Other personnel are assigned in making the necessary phone calls to get the resources ordered and to gather necessary information such as estimated time of arrival. An example of an expanded dispatch center in the Geographic Area Coordination Center, or GACC concept, used by federal wildland firefighting agencies and some states. In California, the state is divided into two regions represented by South Operation or South Ops Dispatch Center in Riverside, California, and the North Operations or North Ops Center in Redding. When a major wildland fire occurs in the southern region and the responsible fire department has to go outside of its jurisdiction for resources, it contacts South Ops. South Ops then dispatches federal and state wildland firefighting resources as necessary to the incident. This allows for the response of numerous resources from various agencies quickly and efficiently. If a large wildland fire requires coordination on a larger scale, resource requests are sent to the National Interagency Coordination Center, or NICC, located at the National Interagency Fire Center, NIFC, in Boise, Idaho. The NICC is the focal point for coordinating the mobilization of resources for wildland fire and other incidents throughout all of the United States. The NICC also provides intelligence and predictive service-related products designed to be used by the internal wildland fire community for wildland fire and incident management decision-making. The South Ops in NICC would track the daily availability of various resources and equipment that could be used for suppressing fires or supporting wildland fire incident operations such as air tankers, helicopters, hand crews, catering services, etc. By having one central order processing center, the closest available resource can be dispatched when requested. In a region where numerous large-scale incidents occur at the same time on a regular basis, this system is necessary. Alright, let's talk about transmission of alarms just a little bit. There are several methods in which alarms are transmitted to the fire department. And as you can see in figure 8-1 below, the 911 system is of course the most prominent. Before the development of the 911 system, the fire alarm box attached to a street light or power pole was very common in cities. There are drawbacks to the fire alarm box, and those are that there were frequent false alarms in some districts. Sometimes they were vandalized or stolen, and only provided one-way communication to the fire department. The dispatcher had no information from the reporting party as to what the problem was, so a full box requiring the response of a ladder truck, a couple of engines, and a chief could be sent to a minor incident. An argument in favor of the alarm box is that it is easy to understand and use. And there are actually still some locations where they are in use. In New York City, for example, you can find fireboxes still. With the installation of telephones in almost every residence and business, the day of the alarm box is finally coming to an end, despite there being some still around. With the 911 system, dispatchers can now ask the reporting party what the problem is and respond with appropriate resources. As the fire department has moved into the area of emergency medical services, or EMS, two-way communication has gained in importance. In some jurisdictions, the level of EMS response is determined by this conversation. For example, a heart attack will get a paramedic response, and a cut finger will get an EMT response. Many departments are training their dispatchers in emergency medical dispatch, or EMD. A trained dispatcher asks questions regarding what is wrong with the victim and can then turn to a page in a pamphlet or computer screen to give instructions to the person at the scene. The instructions include cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR, artificial respiration, controlled bleeding, imminent childbirth, and the treatment of other medical emergencies. This system has proven to be a lifesaver in medical emergencies because the instructions given to the persons at the scene can help preserve the life of the patient until qualified medical help arrives. Since this system requires two dispatchers, one who gathers the information and types it into a computer, and another dispatches the call and initiates the response, so it can be problematic when the dispatch center is busy with more than one incident. In critical cases, at least one of the dispatchers must stay on the line with the persons at the scene until proper units arrive, which ties up the dispatcher and prevents him or her from answering incoming phone calls. There are some challenges with the 911 system. When people who do not speak English call for emergency services, there may not be anyone on duty in the dispatch center who can translate for them. Translation services are now accessible in the form of conference call initiated by the dispatch center. Many recent immigrants do not understand the 911 system because it does not exist in their native country. When there is an emergency, they will drive around looking for a police officer or a fire station seeking help. By the time they find help, it's quite possible that someone who could have been helped has died while waiting. There has been an increase in private alarm companies that monitor homes and businesses for burglary and fire. When they receive a fire alarm, they contact the fire department and a response is started. In many cases, alarms turn out to be false. Police departments across the country require alarm permits to be purchased on an annual basis and charge extra after one or two false alarms. Fire departments are assured to do likewise as the number of false alarms continues to rise. Responding to false alarms is expensive, as fire departments will respond with several pieces of heavy apparatus and numerous personnel. Volunteer firefighters have to leave their jobs and places of business to respond, which places an unnecessary financial burden on themselves and on their businesses. The initiation of a structured response may leave a first-in area uncovered while personnel are responding. All of these issues have to be balanced with the need for quick response to a structure fire. Very few firefighters will call off a response or lessen the amount of equipment responding because it might be a false alarm. Now let's talk about lookouts. This is a position that has been used for a long time to report fires in forest areas, and that is using the lookout tower. The fire lookout person reports to his or her position in the tower early in the morning and does not come down except for short periods until dusk. This can be quite an exciting position in one of the older towers. Some of the older towers are 75 feet high, standing on metal legs. When lightning storms occur, the whole tower can become energized, and the lookout person cannot touch anything for fear of being electrocuted. The lookout person is forced to remain in the chair until the storm is over, no matter how much the tower sways in the wind or how many times it's struck by lightning. A modern lookout tower is much lower to the ground and may, in remote areas, include the person's living quarters. The type of lookout depends on its location on top of a ridge or peak. It needs to provide the visibility of the surrounding area, as you can see in figure 8-2 below. In the center of the room is a table with a firefinder, commonly called an Osborne, named after the inventor, and that's what you see in figure 8-3. This was actually developed in 1915 and is a sighting device mounted on top of a revolving base plate. When a fire or smoke is sighted, the firefinder is rotated until the sighting device lines up with the smoke. The degrees of the compass heading are read from the table. When 2 or 3 lookouts are able to get a fix on the same smoke, a very accurate location can be determined. When this is not possible, the lookout operator provides his or her best speculation to dispatch as to the location of the smoke from the tower. Now let's talk about GIS and mapping. Departments in areas of any great size need updated maps on a regular basis. As new streets are added and new subdivisions are built, the maps in all the stations that respond in the affected areas need to be updated. Parcel maps, which show property ownership, are used for hazard reduction work, to contact the owners of vacant lots, and to determine ownership of acreage burned in wildfires. The introduction of the Geographic Information System, or GIS, has helped with this, and you can see a GIS created map below in Figure 8-4. The GIS uses maps entered into a computer as a base, which can then be overlaid with other information accessed by different databases. The overlays contain additional information that may include place names, business names, property owner names, and location names in rural areas. Dispatchers can locate the address of various places such as quote-unquote Eurosex Farm or quote the head of Hapris Canyon unquote. An aircraft sighting given off a global positioning system, GPS, is given in longitude and latitude. These coordinates are not on most maps. The GIS has this information and ground location, and its relationship to roads can be quickly established. This information is also useful when dispatching medical helicopters or firefighting aircraft to an incident scene. Using the GIS, the dispatcher can, with a few keystrokes, find any location if the information is in the database and determine in whose first-in area it is actually located. Use of this information speeds up the dispatch of equipment, thereby reducing response time. A fire can be mapped fairly easily using information from a GPS, and a ground or air unit using a GPS travels the perimeter and records the coordinate points. The information is then fed into the GIS program, and a detailed map of the perimeter can be created as a map layer with other layers showing property ownership, roads, etc. In wildland areas where fire may cover several jurisdictions, this information is very important when it comes to determining each jurisdiction's share of suppression costs. It is also necessary for statistical purposes when justifying budget requirements based on acres burned. All fires should be investigated to determine their cause. As a part of fire prevention, it is important to know how fires start. If a fire was caused by faulty equipment, for example, future fires may be prevented by using a product recall or issuing a product recall. The officer in charge is responsible for conducting a cause of determination at a fire scene. If the cause is obvious, such as improper welding, the officer in charge should be able to handle the investigation without assistance. However, some fire incidents do not have obvious causes. These may require the services of the Fire Investigation Unit, which can provide further expertise and investigation. Another reason to notify the investigation unit are fire death or fire deaths or fires of suspicious origin. If a crime is suspected, the experts, arson investigators, need to be called in. In most states, if the local fire department does not have the expertise, state investigators may be called upon to assist with cause and origin determination. The Arson Bureau is either under the Fire Prevention Chief or may be its own unit. The personnel in the Arson Bureau are responsible for determining the cause of suspicious fires and preparing criminal cases against arsonists. And you can see an investigation going on below in Figure 8-5. Arson investigators should also be called at any time if there is a serious injury or death due to a fire. Due to their investigative abilities, the arson investigators may also be utilized as an internal affairs bureau for the fire department itself. Here they would investigate harassment and other complaints, either brought by one employee against another or a member of the public against an employee. Arson is one of the most heinous crimes committed. Arson fires are started for many different reasons, including spite or revenge, profit, sexual gratification, and to cover up other crimes, like murder. The arsonist may be targeting up one specific individual, but often ends up killing or injuring numerous innocent people and causing huge property losses as a result. When these fires are started, the lives of firefighters and the general public are put at great risk. For example, human losses were incurred as a result of 2 arson-related fires. The arson fire in Seattle, Washington on January 5, 1995, 4 firefighters died and 5 others were injured. The Esperanza fire in Southern California in 2006, 5 U.S. Forest Service firefighters died. Both directly and indirectly, arson costs tremendous losses of life and property. The direct costs are those of the buildings and contents destroyed in the fire. The indirect costs are the suppression effort, loss of natural resources, as well as department resources, as first-in districts may be left uncovered as they fight the arson-caused fire. The crime of arson can be determined in many cases, but the conviction of the person responsible is difficult. It is the very nature of fire to destroy evidence of the crime. Fingerprints are destroyed and structural collapse, and firefighters with hose lines disturb the scene as well. In wildland situations, the incendiary device may be thrown from a passing vehicle, and the criminal is miles away before the fire is reported. Arson investigators dream of catching the person with the match in their hand, but this is very rare. The arson investigator should be specially trained in gathering and preserving evidence. If the evidence is not properly preserved, it cannot be used in court, case is dismissed, and sadly, the arsonist goes free. Arson investigators are trained in giving testimony as witnesses in a court of law and are trained in the laws of the state regarding arson and collection and preservation of evidence. They are also trained in the art of interviewing suspects and witnesses. In typical investigation, they interview the firefighters at the scene, law enforcement officers, building or area occupants, property owners, witnesses, and bystanders. In cases of suspected insurance fraud, they also contact the insurer of the property itself. They must exert authority at fire scenes and over suspects. A background in firefighting is certainly an asset, and they must be knowledgeable in the chemistry and physics of fire. And they must have a good understanding of how a fire burns to interpret the scene. They must be systematic and careful in gathering evidence and building the case. The legal system requires the investigator to follow set procedures in order for the evidence collected to be admissible in court. The investigator must have knowledge of the laws that pertain to arson and must be able to gather the facts and put together a complete picture of what happened and when. The Arson Bureau maintains a close relationship with law enforcement community. By working closely together, their effectiveness is greatly enhanced. Arson is sometimes used in an attempt to cover up other crimes, and a united fire and law enforcement effort is required to convict the persons responsible. It also works closely with the district attorney's office in preparation for the presentation of a case. Now let's talk about cost recovery. Through the use of civil suits, fire departments are now starting to pursue the recovery costs from persons who cause fires. It is not uncommon for the suppression costs of a major wildland fire to run in the millions of dollars, an amount that is not totally recoverable, unfortunately, in most cases. The recoverable amount is usually limited to the amount of insurance carried by the person who caused the fire, which could be thousands of dollars. In cases where property is burned for profit or other motive, the fire department may be able to collect. Some jurisdictions have passed extraordinary hazard ordinances. They used to recover money spent on the mitigation of hazardous materials incidents. And other areas where cost recovery is pursued are criminal negligence and criminal acts. For example, a person causing a vehicle accident while under the influence of drugs or alcohol. In recent years, hazardous materials have received increased public attention. Several major incidents have led to public demand to get closer control of hazardous materials stored and used in their towns and cities. States have passed right-to-know laws requiring the producers and users of hazardous materials to file a business plan and inventory of the hazardous materials they are storing on site. To process this information and ensure compliance with legal and code requirements, the agency responsible sets up a hazardous materials unit. This unit is not to be confused with the hazardous materials response unit, which responds to spills and leaks. Many fire departments want the responsibility of hazardous material control. They are the ones who would respond to incidents involving hazardous material, and they also possess knowledge of hazardous materials. The organization responsible for hazardous materials control varies among jurisdictions. In some jurisdictions, the responsibility lies with the health department or the environmental health department, and in other jurisdictions, the responsibility is shared between the fire department and the health department. Often in these situations, the fire department and the health department personnel undergo their hazardous materials training together to aid in building a relationship between the departments. The Hazardous Materials Control Unit can provide vital services to the incident response personnel by having the business plans and materials inventories available. The information can be accessed in various ways, through modem, fax machine, or mobile computer, such as a tablet or smartphone. Having this information available can save lives and prevent environmental damage at incident scenes. Knowing what is in a chemical warehouse when it is on fire helps responders make the right decisions as to how to handle the incidents. With some chemicals, a let burn policy is the safest choice because water does not always react well with some chemicals or just materials like sodium, for example. So that's why sometimes they just let it burn because there's no way to put it out. The Hazardous Materials Control Unit also has personnel with technical expertise to assist in decision making. And let me correct myself, I meant liquid sodium. It can actually combust when exposed to the atmosphere, and water will not put out a fire of liquid sodium. So that is one example of a let burn policy. There are very few firefighters with a strong background in chemistry. From an inspection standpoint, the control unit personnel are better prepared than firefighters to identify a hazardous situation. An adjutant, also called an aide, is another support position. The firefighter assigned to this position assists the chief officer in his or her duties. The job includes running errands, typing memos, and researching information for projects. The aide also acts as dispatch recorder and message runner at incidents. It is important that the chief keep track of all the units at the scene, the ones still responding, and their time of arrival. The aide records this information while the chief makes strategic and tactical decisions for the incident. The aide also drives the chief around so he or she can conduct business by cellular phone and review written documents or material on his or her personal computer. This is an opportunity for firefighters to learn more about the department and how it works, as well as an emergency and non-emergency management. Now let's talk a bit about legal issues. Fire departments require technical assistance in many areas, and one of these technical areas is legal services. The Office of the County Counsel or the City Attorney reviews contracts and agreements that involve the fire department. Fire districts contract with private attorneys for these services. The fire department may enter into agreements involving mutual aid or automatic aid with adjoining agencies. They must answer questions about liability and workers' compensation coverage for employees working outside their jurisdiction. If the department decides to lease fire apparatus instead of buying, the department's attorney should review the lease agreement. In many areas, county fire departments contract with their cities inside their boundaries for providing fire protection. Another possible contract is a county contracting with the state for protection of state land within a county. Counsel is also necessary anytime the department runs into legal problems regarding its relationship with an employee or the public. Now we're going to talk a little bit about crime investigation. The police crime lab provides investigative technical support when it assists with the fire department arson personnel. Very few fire departments are able to afford or even need a full crime lab. The arson personnel gather evidence and send it to the crime lab for interpretation. The crime lab determines whether there are traces of flammable liquids or other accelerants in the samples submitted. They do research for fingerprints and other collective evidence. And the police agency is usually the one that administers lie detector tests of suspects when required. For incidents where weather can be a major factor, the National Weather Service can provide assistance. Hazardous material incidents particularly can become very important because wind direction and relative humidity can affect the size and direction of the evacuation or shelter in place when ordered. Weather information is also used to predict the speed and movement of direction of vapor clouds. With wildland fires, unfortunately, there are numerous wildland firefighters that have been killed or injured because of unexpected wind changes a fire's direction or fanned a dormant fire to life. General weather forecasts are available for large areas, much like the ones used by the television news. Spot forecasts, which give a much clearer picture of what is likely to happen at the incident, are available to firefighters on a local scale. Information is gathered at the fire's perimeter and faxed to the National Weather Service, who make a local forecast and fax it back to the requesting agency. A weather observer can be requested for long-term incidents, in other words, those that last for more than a couple of days. The observer sets up a trailer at a fire camp to take local observations and make weather predictions specific to the incident area. Now, also regarding hazardous materials again, technical assistance is a must in the area of hazardous materials. Computer databases are available to determine the hazards of various materials. Research resources in the form of books are also available. With approximately 2,000 new chemicals developed each year, that's almost, what is that, 8 a day? That's a lot. Books and computer databases soon become outdated very quickly. By subscribing to a database service, the information is constantly updated. The health department can be of great assistance in these types of incidents. They have personnel trained in the field of environmental health who usually have chemistry backgrounds and can determine the properties of unknown chemicals. It is often necessary to determine at a scene whether a spilled white powder is poisonous, corrosive, or harmless, and whether it may require collection and disposal as a hazardous material, or it can just be washed off the highway. Until this determination is made, no real action can be taken because the hazardous properties are unknown. There are special hazards. Other technical sections may be able to be set up in jurisdictions that contain oil refineries or other special hazards. For example, the LA City Fire Department has a technical section devoted exclusively to the Metro Rail. They've already had a major fire in a tunnel under construction and recognize the need for technical expertise in special hazards. Many of the requirements in model fire codes came from fire department technical sections, recognizing the need for protection systems. Departments involved in the EMS or higher levels have a technical section, and this technical section monitors the activities of paramedics and EMTs in the department by performing quality assurance, or QA. QA requires the review of specified percentage of EMS incidents to ensure that protocols and procedures are followed correctly. They also provide research and development if needed. They ensure that the personnel providing life support to the public are properly trained and equipped. Smaller departments can rely on the county EMS department for their needs. The fire department has to manage many types of information, such as expenditures needing to be recorded for budgeting purposes, generating new equipment specifications and sending out bids to manufacturers and suppliers, putting statistical information from fire and medical aid reports into an understandable form, gathering and maintaining information that pertains to contracts and agreements is very important, and reviewing and applying training information on a new technique is something that's also recorded. They also review new laws, codes, and ordinances for their effect on the department and its operations, and gather and record personnel and payment information. To manage all of this information, the Information Systems Bureau has been developed. Personnel positions and responsibilities of the Information Systems Bureau are, for example, repair technicians that make sure a computer system is up and functioning, and personnel that handle information as it comes in. These personnel are assigned to data entry and enter information such as fire reports received at headquarters into the department's database. Data management personnel control the flow of information and make sure it is directed appropriately. They may suggest improvements to the system and how data are generated. They manipulate the information available to present in the form of reports, which are used to collect money, justify contract amounts and budgets, and track expenditures. The systems analyst maintains the computer operating system for the department. This person may have a wide array of responsibilities, including helping users with their applications, determining user needs, configuring hardware and software, speccing out new equipment for the department so it purchases what it needs, and the webmaster and social media consultant maintain the department's internet presence and keep social media sites updated with department information. The impact of social media on the modern fire department is not to be taken lightly. For example, INCIWeb, INCI, capital WEB, provides regular incident updates to the public. Social media can have a negative effect if it is not used responsibly. During the rim fire in California in 2013, civilians were posting incorrect evacuation and incident information on sites such as Twitter and Facebook. Their information was nothing more than rumors that spread quickly. The fire department personnel clerk is involved with matters regarding the employees of the department. In a department with few employees, the city personnel clerk takes care of personnel matters. Larger departments may have their own personnel clerk assigned. When personnel are to be hired or promoted, the personnel clerk fills out the necessary paperwork to requisition the position from the agency personnel department. The personnel department sends the required number of names from the list of eligible candidates for interview. Once the person is notified that he or she has been hired, the personnel clerk schedules the medical exam and drug screen. Once cleared, the newly hired employee sees the clerk to complete the required paperwork for setting up payroll deductions. The personnel clerk handles the enrollment forms for health insurance and other benefits. When personnel are retired or terminated, the personnel clerk ensures that all the proper forms are completed. The personnel office issues personnel evaluations and retains them when they are completed for record-keeping purposes. When an employee on a work-related injury is on a work-related injury leave, the personnel clerk makes sure that all the proper forms are completed and sent to the state and other agencies that are involved in workers' compensation. If there's personal property damage to an employee's property, the personnel clerk handles the claim forms. In some departments, the personnel clerk completes the estimate of salary and benefit costs for preparation of the budget. The personnel clerk works with the payroll clerk to make sure that personnel receive their base salary, overtime, pay raises, and incentives, and are paid the correct amount. In situations where the fire department is not a standalone department, outside the fire department is the jurisdiction-wide personnel department. This would be county-wide in a county fire department and city-wide in a city fire department. This term is becoming more common for these departments is human resources. The personnel department administers the entrance and promotional written tests and assists with the oral examinations. The personnel department is given this function to avoid the filing of charges of favoritism. The personnel department then ensures that all federal and state guidelines regarding affirmative action and equal opportunity employment are followed. It also has personnel who are trained with the Americans with Disabilities Act employment requirements. A personnel analyst may be assigned to assist in writing the job requirements for different job classifications, such as firefighter and company officer. As the jobs change over the years in terms of responsibilities and requirements, these classifications need to be updated. Not only do they affect the entrance requirements, they also justify pay increases as personnel are required to operate at a higher level of responsibility, skill, and training. These requirements are represented in the job announcement and the testing procedure. The personnel department is involved with the active recruitment of prospective firefighters. There are pre-academy tutorial programs to assist persons in preparing to take the firefighter test. Some of these programs involve only mental skills, and others involve weight training and other activities to help recruits pass the physical agility test. It has an affirmative action section that ensures there are no discriminatory practices and that the targeted groups are reached. An important part of the fire department management team is the business manager, who reports directly to the fire chief. This position is similar to a chief financial officer in a private corporation, for example. This is usually a civilian position because the person is hired for his or her financial expertise, not firefighting skills. The business manager and department staff prepare the final budget document to be presented to the jurisdiction for approval. They also participate in the research necessary to justify the budget request. The business manager assists with budget preparation through revenue prediction activities. The main budget is a combination of all the subordinate budgets, the budgets for operation, support services, training, prevention, vehicles, and equipment. When there are separate separate staff officers in charge of all the subordinate functions. They submit their budget requests to the business manager, who determines if there is enough money to cover all of the proposals. If not, which sadly is usually the case, negotiation among staff officers ends up taking place. The budget is then presented to the jurisdiction budget analyst for review. The budget analyst works with the business manager and the fire chief on the final proposal that is submitted to elected officials of a particular jurisdiction. Some other responsibilities of the business manager include keeping track of all expenditures, and that they must be well versed in all of the federal, state, and local laws that govern the actions of the fire department when it spends or receives money. The business manager's staff does all the day-to-day accounting for the department. They pay the bills and cash the incoming checks. Many departments contract for services from other agencies, such as the personnel department, and budget transfers must be made. When other agencies inside or outside the jurisdiction contract with the fire department for services, they must be billed. The business manager also does all the ordering for the department. The staff keeps track of what has been delivered and when to pay the bill. It may also have responsibility for inventory of the warehouse and central stores to prevent pilferage or misuse of departmental resources. When major incidents occur, such as a large wildland fire, flood, and hurricanes, resources from multiple agencies and the private sector are required to mitigate the incident. Prior to their use, agreements and contracts must be in place, spelling out who will pay for what and what the payment amount will be. Even government agencies require contracts for payment. Just the work involved in designing, updating, and administrating the resource ordering system requires thousands of personnel hours annually. A contract needs to be signed between the owner and the requesting agency prior to any privately owned resources being used at an incident. There are contracts to be written and signed with vendors for every item that may be used on an incident. Persons with equipment such as helicopters, air tanker, and water tenders need their equipment inspected on an annual basis before contract is allowed. At the incident itself, there are equipment time recorders and check-in personnel who keep track of who is at the incident and their status. The time equipment was used and its owner must be recorded so the owner can be paid for its use. When supplies are delivered, they have to be accepted and signed for. Personnel time must be recorded so they are paid properly. And management teams are brought in on large incidents just for this purpose. The people assigned to them have been trained in keeping records and preparing necessary forms so that the information can be processed properly. The warehouse central stores facility is where items needed on a regular basis by the fire stations and offices are kept. And we've talked about it before, but here's an example of one as you see below in figure 8-6. This is also the site where much of the department's non-motorized equipment such as fire hose is repaired. The warehouse manager and stock clerks receive, sort, and store items that are supplied to the station. The warehouse also acts as a central receiving facility for items ordered by the department. When the stations send in supply requisitions, the requested materials are gathered and either delivered by the warehouse personnel or picked up by the station personnel. The warehouse may also be capable of making repairs to equipment such as hoses, couplings, nozzles, gated Ys, and other appliances. They are sent to the warehouse and the personnel either repair them or replace them as needed. Many departments have an SCBA repair technician who repairs SCBA and tests new SCBA to ensure it is working satisfactorily before being placed into service. By having this capability in-house, the department can reduce the cost and time spent to use on an outside contractor for service. The technician shop may also be equipped with a breathing air compressor for filling SCBA bottles. A stock of filled bottles is kept on hand for exchange when a station needs filled bottles. The SCBA for other governmental departments can be repaired there and their bottles filled as time permits. When the fire department provides EMS, the technician may also have a facility for refilling medical oxygen bottles. The U.S. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management have similar facilities. The U.S. Forest Service has a warehouse for the entire forest and a smaller one located at the headquarters of each ranger district in a forest. Their warehouses supply the needs of all the personnel, not just fire personnel, including materials for suppression, prevention, recreation, timber, and other needs. It is not uncommon for the fire crew assigned to the district headquarters to repaint picnic tables, trail signs, and fire prevention signs in the spring. This is usually located at the district headquarters station and is a 50 to 200 person cache of fire tools that must be maintained. Once the fire season is over, the firefighting staff stays on, maintains equipment, plants trees, and works on other projects. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management smoke jumpers spend the winter and any other downtime between incidents making helicopter rappelling harnesses and other equipment. They are well known for their design and construction of many items of wildland firefighting equipment. The fire department may have its own repair garage that services the fire apparatus. The mechanics at this facility are civilian employees who work a 40-hour week directly for the fire department. When a fire department is large enough to support its own repair garage, it should have one because the mechanics assigned will have specialized knowledge of the apparatus and related equipment and can ensure that this equipment will receive top priority at the facility. Fire departments also need communications capability. Much communication is carried out through radios installed in the dispatch center, the headquarters, the stations, the vehicles, and with handheld units. After installation, all of these units will need maintenance. When the department covers a large and topographically diverse area, a system of repeaters is usually installed. These boost the radio signal and provide the capability for any unit in the department to talk to any other. The radio technicians install and service all of the radio equipment used by the department, including pagers, and here's an example of such a shop that you see below in figure 8-7. Okay, now we're going to summarize everything we've talked about in this chapter. So here we go. Not all of the personnel who work for the fire department respond to incidents. Many work in supporting roles that aid in the incident responders in performing their jobs. Even in a one-station department, there needs to be someone assigned to answer the phone and alert the station crew that their services are required. One way that departments handle the communications for incidents that become large or complex is to set up an expanded dispatch, sometimes called a command center, to take some of the load off the dispatchers performing their normal duties. There are several methods in which alarms are transmitted to the fire department, the most common of which is the 911 system. A position that has been used for a long time to report fires in the forest areas is the lookout tower, but modern lookouts depend on their location on top of a ridge or a peak to give them visibility of the surrounding areas. Departments in areas of any great size need updated maps on a regular basis. The crime of arson can be determined in many cases, but convicting the person responsible is difficult. So it is the very nature of fire to destroy evidence in a crime, obviously. The Arson Bureau is either under the Fire Prevention Chief or is its own unit. The personnel in the Arson Bureau are responsible for determining the cause of suspicious fires. Arson investigators should be specifically trained in the gathering and preserving of evidence, and if evidence is not properly preserved, the case is dismissed and the arsonist goes free. An effort that is becoming more common is cost recovery. Through the use of civil suits, the fire department is now starting to pursue the recovery of costs from persons who cause fires. In recent years, hazardous materials incidents have received increased public attention. Several major incidents have led the public to demand closer control of hazardous materials stored and used in their towns and cities. The next thing is an adjutant or aide is a firefighter who assists the chief officers in duties such as running errands, typing memos, and researching information for projects. The requirements placed on the modern fire department are such that the technical assistance is often required in many areas, including legal issues, crime investigation, and weather, and hazardous materials, and special hazards, and EMS. The fire department seems to have more information than it can manage. To manage all of this information, the Information Systems Bureau has been developed. The fire department personnel clerk is involved with matters regarding the employees of the department. The business manager, who can be compared to a chief financial officer in a private company is usually a civilian because the person is hired for his or her financial expertise, not specifically firefighting skills. And management teams are brought in on large incidents to keep records and prepare necessary forms so the information of the incident and its needs that have incurred can be processed properly. The warehouse and central stores facility is where items needed on a regular basis by the fire stations and offices are kept. This is also the site where much of the department's non-motorized equipment, such as fire hose, is repaired. And the fire department may have its own repair garage to service fire apparatus. The mechanics at this facility are civilian employees who work a 40-hour week directly for the fire department. Radio technicians install and service all the radio equipment used by the department, including pagers. Okay, class, thank you for your attentiveness. And with any chapter, just like this one, if you need any help with any aspect of anything that we were covered, please let your instructor know. Thank you, and we'll see you next class.